What is needed is the creation of a democratically elected, representative, fully accountable and transparent planetary government which has the lawful ability to address global problems and issues. This democratic world government should not exist to serve the narrow interests of national governments or multinational corporations. It should exist and function to serve the best interests of humanity. The political union of humanity is both possible and desirable. In a divided world, we cannot hope to address such problems as climate change, war, poverty, or terrorism. Only united can we hope to build a prosperous future for generations to come. It is both desirable and possible to abolish the obscenity of war. Violence is not an effective way for human beings to settle disputes. History has taught us many lessons, and this is one of them. History has also shown us that the most bitter enemies can be brought together to work for the common goal of peace. People rightly desire peace because of the obvious benefits it brings. With peace comes prosperity for communities. With war comes misery and death. It is both desirable and possible to abolish poverty. What we have is a tiny minority of extremely wealthy groups and individuals dotted around the world, their riches beyond the imaginations of the vast majority of humanity. And then we have huge numbers of people whose lives consist of a daily grind and seemingly inescapable hardship. Hunger and the possibility of starvation hang over many. For many, there is no clean drinking water, there is no place to call home. Many cannot afford the medicine needed to survive. Disease stalks the lives of you and your loved ones if you are unfortunate enough to be born in the wrong place. The current state of affairs is obscene. A generous donation from each of the Earth's top 100 billionaires could potentially end world poverty. The numbers have been studied, this can be done. With the creation of a democratic world government, the funds for this project could be acquired and allocated in as transparent a way as is reasonably possible. If donations were not forthcoming, other proper and legal methods could be employed to acquire the necessary financial backing. With the weight of humanity behind such a goal, we can realistically succeed, and in doing so, countless lives would be saved. There is no justification for the possession of nuclear weapons. People everywhere surely have the right to live on a planet where they are not nuclear hostages. Nuclear weapons do not make the world a safer place, they obviously make it considerably more dangerous. An end to global arms trading is a necessary step in securing peace for the peoples of Earth. The military-industrial complex must be done away with. One cannot deny that arms dealing is a very lucrative business for national governments, corporations, manufacturers and facilitators. What motivation do people who profit massively from death and bloodshed have to stop making deadly weapons? Quite simply, the peoples of Earth must say no more profiting from death and destruction. If we hope to live in a just and fair world, a free world, then people trafficking and slavery in all its forms must be done away with. This will not be easy to achieve. Better intelligence and grade A law enforcement are of course needed, but also what we need is communities all over the world to turn their backs on brutal and cowardly traditions. Better members of communities everywhere have to stand up to the criminals, and these brave people must be supported fully by the authorities. The courageous must be supported. An energy revolution is possible and desirable. What do we mean by the term energy revolution? People and countries should stop using fossil fuels. A complete halt in production and consumption of oil, gas, coal, etc. is urgently required. Clean and renewable energy should be brought into the full. This is not science fiction. The technology to make this huge transition already exists. Massive amounts of labour, resources and money are invested in oil and gas. Small elites are getting richer all the time, but the party has to end somewhere. We have to think of the health of the planet moving forward. New employment opportunities will emerge during this huge transition, but as with any revolution, there will be losers. The world has seen more than enough of dictators and monarchs. We desire to see in a new world where the absolute ruler has gone the way of the dinosaur. In this new world, there will be no royal privilege. Unelected, unimpeachable heads of state, those who owe their position and status to poisonous traditions, should exist only in history books. A so-called birthright to wear a crown and call oneself a king or queen is an absurdity. The military tyrant ruling his country with brutal commands must go extinct. This can be brought about under orderly international conditions. A truly free world requires the removal of certain obstacles to liberty. What we desire is the local and global victory of democracy over the forces of authoritarianism and injustice. The emergence of a true world order requires the victory of a humanistic worldview, a worldview dealing with politics, religion, economics, society and culture. This worldview should overcome the present system as characterized by war, corruption, unsustainable consumption, pollution of the environment and gross inequality. This humanistic worldview is essentially a common sense philosophy, a worldview which reasonable people the world over can get behind. Every person on the planet should have the right to a decent and free education. It is in the best interests of all nations and cultures to see that people receive the necessary tools to discharge the duties of citizenship. The right to access the accumulated wisdom of humankind should be regarded as a fundamental one. Every person should have the right to participate in the cultural and political life of his or her society. One of the great tasks of a democratic world government would surely be the removal of all unjustifiable obstacles to free speech and free expression. For the health and well-being of human societies, a free marketplace of ideas must exist. The protection of unpopular ideas must be established in law. It is surely in the best interests of humankind to do away with the obscene inequality which is causing many social, mental and economic problems today. More equal societies tend to be more cohesive societies with greater social mobility and higher levels of trust. Large-scale redistribution of wealth and resources with the goal of making the world a more equal place is a noble goal. This policy should be carried out by democratically elected councils working at local and regional levels. A more equal world being a sound objective, we propose that a democratically elected, accountable and transparent planetary regime seek to implement a global minimum wage as well as a maximum wage. The absurd concept of a war on terror should be consigned to history. Terrorism is a tactic employed by state and non-state actors alike. One cannot win a war against terrorism. Cycles of violence and revenge must be broken. This is a task for the ages. People everywhere have a vested interest in seeing an end to brutal conflicts. It is the conditions that lead to the outbreak of wars, which have to be addressed. We cannot fight fire with fire forever. If we keep looking to solve problems through military solutions, then more bloodshed we shall have. The war system has to be replaced with a peace system. The war on drugs has been a disaster. The violence of state actors has played right into the hands of brutal criminal gangs. We strongly support the decriminalisation of drugs worldwide, subject to world government oversight. More intelligent methods must be employed to defeat organised crime. The rule of law can bring about peace, order and freedom. There is no good reason to believe this cannot be achieved on the world stage. But we cannot simply sit back and wish or pray a parliament of the world into existence. We have to put real pressure on the powers that be. The will of the people can and does bring about significant change. An irresistible force can be created. You can change the world. Who is qualified to rule the world? The people have the right to choose who represents them in Parliament, so let us ask a different question. Who do you want representing you? Experienced public servants should represent the people at the global level. Highly qualified legal experts should represent the people at the global level. Courageous rights activists should represent the people at the global level. Hard-working people from all walks of life should represent the people. Honest and sincere people who stand by their principles should represent you. The people should represent the people. The model of our democratic world government is, of course, greatly important. We advocate for a federal republic. A written constitution should be adopted by the Parliament on the basis of a favourable two-thirds majority vote. This constitution should seek to create a balance of powers between the executive, legislative and judicial branches of government. The constitution must also detail a Bill of Rights for all world citizens. Powers of the new world state must be detailed and limited by the Constitution itself. Government agencies and officials should be kept in line by constitutional watchdogs of the Federal World Republic at all times. The right to follow any religion and the right to worship freely would have to be guaranteed by the Constitution. Freedom from religion would also have to be guaranteed. We advocate for a federal world republic which is entirely secular. As things stand, the people, the general public, citizens of the world, do not have a say in the way the world is run. The rich and powerful control the destiny of nation-states. International institutions cannot escape the influence of wealthy lobbyists and pernicious special interest groups. As things stand, we are excluded from international decision-making. All of the world's nations and territories are embedded within an undemocratic and non-transparent international system. We see democracy as the tool for our liberation. It is high time we all started viewing ourselves as world citizens who should have a place at the table, who should have a voice on the world stage. There has been a revolution in technology over the past few decades, which has changed the way in which many of us view the world and ourselves. The ways in which we communicate and travel have changed significantly. For the first time in history, we have a planetary consciousness. Globalization cannot be reversed now. We have to move with the times. Given that we live in a globalized world with formidable technology, given that there is a moral imperative to do away with the war system of today, and given the multitude of dangers the species now faces, surely it should follow that a world state be created with the aims of achieving world peace, ending poverty everywhere, protecting the environment from the gross excesses of humankind, bringing about a more equal society, and forging a sustainable future for generations to come. The poor and the oppressed desire the very thing many take for granted, namely freedom and democracy. The oppressed and the downtrodden long for an institution which could enforce human rights. Those who have suffered humiliation and injustice long for an institution which could hold national leaders and governments, as well as corporate leaders and directors, to account. We advocate for nothing less than the liberation of the earth. Simply speaking, we want an international institution which puts our interests, the best interests of humanity, before the narrow interests of nation-states and greed-driven companies. Ethnocentrism, the tendency to believe one's group or culture is of central importance, and that other groups are measured in relation to one's own, is both dangerous and destructive. Premature judgments and false assumptions can and do spring forth in social environments where ethnocentric ideas are tolerated and encouraged. Ethnocentrism can lead people to deal in generalizations about other cultures, values, and beliefs. The world has surely seen enough of the kind of attitudes which give rise to hostility, unfair discrimination, lazy stereotyping, and even hatred. Claims of national or racial superiority have been made throughout history. Such ideas are not born in a vacuum. An ethnocentric society is prerequisite. Really horrific things can occur where people buy into warped, nationalistic, or bigoted ideas. Wars of extermination, genocide, and slavery are the children of horrendously bad ideas and poisonous beliefs. We must examine what we hear and read. We must be skeptical of the claims we hear. The human family is rich in diversity. Seeking to better understand people from different backgrounds helps to broaden our own perspectives. We are all brothers and sisters despite our cultural differences. Of course, individuals and groups have their differences. Everyone is unique and special, and there are a wide variety of cultures around the world. Yet human beings everywhere share many similarities. We all have needs which must be met. People everywhere hope, love, share, compete, cooperate, remember, build, create art, create laws, create states, and understand the importance of family. We are a ritualistic species. We are a tribal species. People all over the world are capable of compassion and empathy. The many things which unite us should be our focus. But of course, there are those who want to keep us divided and weak for their own personal ends. It is true to say that many movements, past and present, thrive on division and tend to achieve success where fear and ignorance are strong. We must recognize those who seek to build walls between us as enemies of a potentially peaceful new world. We, desiring the union of humankind through a world state, simply have to defeat our foes. We must seek to free the peoples of the world through education. Education can knock down walls. Education can build bridges. as can love. Education and love are two things people everywhere surely cannot get enough of. Let us consider several organisations operating now on the world stage: the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the G20, the United Nations. What do all these bodies have in common? These organisations are not democratic institutions. They do not represent the citizens of the world. The current system is not only undemocratic, it is also messy and inadequate. The United Nations organisation, in its current form, is simply not equipped to deal with world problems. Such serious issues as war, climate change, poverty, and the spread of killer diseases can't be addressed in anything like an effective way by a body as weak as the UN. We must also recognise that the UN is structurally unjust. It was, of course, set up to favour the victors of the Second World War. The UN Charter reflects this reality. People everywhere have a right to world citizenship. It is not right that national governments and multinational corporations can be allowed to trample on people's rights, exploit and endanger workers, and wreak havoc with the environment. To treat people as commodities rather than human beings with personal dignity is a disgrace. It is right and proper that one should say, "I am a citizen of the world. By virtue of being human, I have certain rights that no authority, no government can take away from me. See yourself and act as a world citizen." Technically speaking, in order to be a citizen, it requires a state to exist. We need a government, one we elect to office. We need a regime which has the power to safeguard our rights and protect our best interests. We cannot hope to do away with the status quo, do away with the war system, under the current political climate. Without a truly powerful and democratic world government, the planet will remain a playground for the richest oil and gas companies. National governments, following narrow agendas, will continue to rule our lives. Weapons contractors and dealers will continue to spread death and misery. We cannot have a stable world order while there are regimes who can only maintain their grip on power by brutalizing their own populations. We cannot have global security in a world of fleeing refugees and internally displaced peoples. We cannot have world peace where imperial regimes continue to commit atrocities in foreign lands with impunity. Every year, nations around the world spend obscene amounts of money arming themselves, training young people to kill, and upgrading military equipment. We submit that national security in a world of nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons, in a world of heavily armed national regimes stoking the fires of hatred, in a climate of rampant paranoia, is an illusion. A third world war is a real possibility. Can we as a species change our ways? We are a huge destructive force on this planet as things stand. This is indisputable given the evidence. Will it take a massive disaster for us to try and drastically change course? It does not have to. We can abolish war with a united effort. We can create a sustainable way of life with a decent standard of living for all peoples. The technology exists, as does the desire. Much hard work and struggle lie ahead. One should not automatically bow to those in positions of power. One should question authority and dogma as a matter of course. One should not meekly follow the herd. One should never be afraid to offend those who deserve to be offended. One should doubt regularly. Doubt is a virtue. One should scrutinize actions and events. One should always question motives. One should give as good as one gets. One should always remember that a closed mind is never a free mind. The moral worth of the individual is abundantly clear. We humans are social creatures. Society is a collective of individuals. Without the individualistic freethinkers, the scientists and the philosophers, the scholars and the artists and the activists of yesterday, we would be in a much poorer condition today. Free speech and free inquiry are essential to moral improvement. Individual liberty is essential to the good life. We, as a species, wouldn't have gotten this far without it. We won't get much further if we lose it. One should aim to practice the scientific method in everyday life. For the good of the species, we need sharp and skeptical minds everywhere. We live in a material world which can be explained by naturalistic causes. Through scientific education, our world can be understood. Science offers genuine explanations. In our world of increasingly advanced technology, scientific literacy is essential. People must be given the tools they require to adapt and flourish in an ever-changing social environment. It is surely a dangerous thing to hold an absolute view of good versus evil. This is a feature of the authoritarian mind. Authoritarian regimes throughout history have viewed themselves as the defenders of truth and purity, while viewing their enemies as evil, perhaps less than human. A mind which unquestioningly accepts whatever comes from the mouth of the ruler, the master, the king, the dictator, is not a mind which could ever appreciate that truth is something one finds through independent research and investigation. One should think for oneself. One should never be satisfied being told what to think by someone else. One should question conventional and traditional values. If a group of people refuse their own ability to think freely and assess what they hear or read with an open mind, and instead put absolute trust in their leaders, then they have turned their backs on the better part of themselves and are ripe to fall into slavery. Climate change, global warming, is a reality. The scientific consensus is well known. Those who have chosen to research the subject and look at the evidence objectively can see the truth. Human actions are changing the climate. Various deals and agreements have been reached internationally over the years and decades, but we see greenhouse gas emissions continue to increase. Climate deals, which are not entirely legally binding, are not worth much. In the absence of a world government which can legally enforce an end to all greenhouse gas emitting industries, our future is very uncertain. As we continue to pollute the world, destroy ecosystems, cause the acidification of the oceans, etc., we continue to play a deadly game. The future of our species and many others is at stake. One huge danger looming on the horizon is the possibility of geoengineering. As the effects of climate change become more apparent as the years and decades pass, the option to interfere in the Earth's climate system through large-scale geoengineering projects may be considered in earnest by national governments, international bodies, or by wealthy private groups or individuals. As the planet heats up more and more, as the world becomes a more extreme and inhospitable place, perhaps desperation will become the order of the day. Perhaps a great demand to intervene and try to reverse the effects of climate change could pressurize regimes into drastic action. It's not difficult to understand why a technological fix to solve a huge problem like climate change would be appealing to many people. We view large-scale geoengineering proposals as very dangerous. The potential long-term consequences of a failed intervention could be catastrophic, but the temptation remains. Greenhouse gas emissions could be lowered unilaterally by a large-scale climate intervention program, whereas lowering emissions through a legal framework, halting production and consumption of fossil fuels, must be done multilaterally. We stand on the conviction that a legal framework for dealing with climate change be established by a democratic global regime elected by the people. The world must convert to a green economy. All nations and territories must be a part of this revolution. Humans can survive, and indeed thrive, in a new system, but it will require a serious struggle and much hard work to adapt. We are an adaptable species. We are never going to have a problem-free world. There is always going to be trouble and stress. There will never be a utopia. We have to deal with hard reality rather than looking to escape into comfortable fantasy. And we have to accept that even when we do successfully face and solve our problems, new ones will be waiting for us just over the horizon. What would be the advantages of having a single global currency? We would have no exchange rate fluctuations. We would have no competing currencies. Money would no longer be a commodity bought and sold on the market. Money would have value only for its worth in buying goods and services in a single global currency. If we were to bring in a single global currency, we could do away with currency risk, which would be of great benefit to investors around the world. Obviously, the possibility of national currency failure would be eliminated with a single world currency. Implementing such a change would be a daunting task given the political differences that exist between countries, but this is not an impossible task. We believe international trade would become much more efficient with a single world currency. If we were to do away with the costly multi-currency system of today, would we really miss it? We truly live in the age of information. Many of us live in an environment where our senses are taking a hammering on a regular basis. Our capacity for taking things in can be overwhelmed. Are we now living in an age of the overstimulated human brain? Is the 24/7 news and entertainment culture seriously diminishing our ability to think clearly and act reasonably? Maybe we should look at it this way. We are consumers. Many of us have fallen into patterns and habits of overconsumption. We strongly suggest that it is more important than most people are aware to simply switch off, unplug, unwind, relax and reflect. Your mental and emotional health may well depend on your ability to unplug from the machine as a regular occurrence. Is it unethical to spy on someone? If I am spying on a criminal with the end goal being that this person be brought to justice, surely this is well and good. But is it ever that black and white? Is it okay for parents to spy on their children? We live in a dangerous world. Parents have an obligation to protect their kids. How can they do this if they don't do a bit of eavesdropping from time to time? A watchful eye is better than a blind one, surely. What of a government? Is it surely okay for a government who has the best interests of the people to spy on its citizens, right? What if a government had the means to spy on all of us all of the time? If the result of this were that no crime ever went unpunished, then surely it could be justified, right? What if the powers that be could preempt any would-be terrorists from striking by simply doing away with privacy rights altogether? Who in their right mind would complain? The problem is that spying on people doesn't necessarily stop crimes from taking place. The truth is that law-abiding citizens are constantly being victimized by systems of surveillance while criminals walk free. Governments not only spy on their own citizens in the name of national security, but do the same to citizens of other nations. Oppressors the world over can excuse any behaviour on national security grounds. Espionage is a dirty game played by many nations. What is excused in the name of national security is oftentimes just a cover for a hidden agenda, which has much to do with furthering the narrow interests of powerful elites. The argument, if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to worry about, tends to come up frequently where the subject of privacy is raised. Most people have something they wish to keep private. Privacy for a law-abiding citizen is not about concealing negative or nasty secrets. Privacy isn't that simple. Some would view privacy and secrecy as one and the same thing. Privacy can be viewed as a plurality of related things. Secrecy is about hiding information from certain people. Oversimplifying privacy can cheapen and degrade the discussion for sure. We affirm that law-abiding citizens of the world have a right to a private life, have a right to private space and private business. If the state wishes to spy on its citizens, then it is the government which must justify its position to the citizens. The citizens shouldn't have to justify a privacy right to the state. This is to get things backwards. There can be no attempt by a democratic world government to enforce populations or nations to adhere to child limitation. Policy of child limitation would cause outright rebellion in many parts of the world. A world of forced abortions and sterilizations is not a desirable or free one. No government should have the power to force women to have abortions as a matter of policy or have the ability to sterilize people as it sees fit. Tyranny must never be tolerated. It must always be confronted and defeated. We live in a world of finite resources. There is a limit to the number of humans that can exist on the planet. Where is this limit? We simply don't know. Is there a desirable number? We feel it isn't the place of a political party or a world government to put forward a desirable number. Promoting the use of contraceptives is not a bad thing. Promoting abstinence isn't necessarily a bad thing. Encouraging smaller families isn't necessarily a bad thing. Improving the status of women and reducing infant mortality are morally decent methods for population control. Infanticide, war, the forced sterilization of undesirables, and forced abortions, these are population control methods that no decent person could ever support. A heavy-handed or brutal approach to population control is simply not the way to go. Liberty and personal dignity have to be respected as we move forward and face our problems. Life is a fragile and precious thing, an amazing thing also. It is amazing that you are here. Chances of your ever coming into existence were very, very remote. But here you are, trillions of potential people. Didn't make the cut, so to speak, but you did. You and those around you are rare winners, to be sure. We living, breathing, feeling human beings, walking around in relatively good health, we are the fortunate ones. We should count ourselves lucky. We should use our limited time wisely. Existence is something to be enjoyed as much as you can, even as you inevitably struggle. Your life is temporary. You will not get a chance to do it over if you don't like the way you did it the first time. Make sure the life you live is the life you want to live. We people of the modern world owe much to the endeavours of those who came before us, who suffered and struggled, who loved and lost, who lived here before us. The dead walk with us as we move on the future. Let us never lose sight of who we are, what we are, and where we came from. The lessons of history are often forgotten. What do we see today? We see imperial aggression in the name of freedom and national pride. We see militaristic expansion in the name of a greater security. Governments try to convince their populations that it is war and not peace that will bring about stability. This isn't a modern phenomenon. History teaches us many lessons, if we would only choose to pay attention. One such lesson is that empires always fall in the end. There are no exceptions. Empires overspend, overstretch, become internally corrupt, get bogged down in endless wars, get worn down by insurrections, become weakened by intrigue and plot, and are apt to be destroyed by those who claim to serve them. For the empire, there is no such thing as enough. There is never enough land, never enough resources to plunder, never enough power. Empires which are not destroyed by rival imperialists will eventually destroy themselves. It is the age of empires which must be done away with. A new age can end the cycles of bloodshed, tyranny, poverty, and war. The age of a world republic, backed by the people, could plausibly bring about the downfall of imperial regimes worldwide. Such an occurrence would be worthy of celebration the world over. This noble ambition could be fulfilled. The denial of humanness is not always something easy to identify. It could be right under your nose without you knowing about it. Dehumanization is not always deliberate. One can say something dehumanizing in everyday life without even recognizing it. There is animalistic dehumanization. One might compare someone unfavorably to a creature regarded as being lowly to establish that that person, subject to the comparison, is somehow less than fully human. And then there is mechanistic dehumanization, where people might be labeled as cold, lacking in human warmth, and they may be denied agency. It becomes easier for people to attack other people when certain parts of their humanness has been taken away. Of course, there are those who lack empathy, and there are people with mental disorders who might well be regarded as being somehow morally handicapped. But having a disability or a disorder does not make a person any less human. A person who is less intelligent than you is no less of a human being than you. A woman is no more or less human than a man. An African is no less human than an Asian or a European. What does it mean to be human? We can define ourselves in this way or that. We can classify ourselves biologically. We can come up with lists of exclusively human characteristics, but people have different standards and values. Some people will not live up to the values and standards of others, and so lists will vary. The subjective nature of these lists should be noted. We would do well to recognize that there is more than one kind of humanness and more than one method of dehumanization available to those who make it their aim to attack or destroy another group of people. Serious dangers come with a certain way of thinking. We have seen this many times before. People from an in-group label or categorize an out-group in an extremely negative way, excluding them from treatment as would befit humans. If you subscribe to an ideology which tells you that some people, because of what they are or what they believe, are somehow less human than you are, or don't even qualify as human, then we strongly urge you to look at changing your belief system and loyalties for your own sake and for the good of others. We would caution all peoples to remain vigilant. Beware of leaders or governments who label their perceived enemies as evil or wicked or barbaric or unnatural. Some want to see the world as being as simple as good versus evil, the righteous versus the forces of darkness. The world isn't so simple. There are many grey areas where ethics and morals are concerned. A human being is always your fellow human being, whatever it is he or she has done or is alleged to have done. The amount of damage done through dehumanizing acts to communities, families, nations, or entire continents cannot really be measured. We can't undo the atrocities of the past, but we can effect positive change in the present by treating each other with a certain level of respect as would befit a society heading in a better direction. We support the abolition capital punishment worldwide on humanitarian grounds. The death penalty is not an effective deterrent. It is our firm belief that the state should not hold the power to kill its citizens through judicial means. Law courts should not hold the power of life and death. A more progressive path must be forged. We believe it is in people's best interest to support and become involved with local workers' cooperatives and food growing programs, where local communities are able to support themselves through their own labours. Economic and environmental sustainability can be achieved. We believe it would be one such task of world government to take the necessary steps to reorganize economies on the principle of local autonomy and sustainability. In order to achieve this, some of the unethical activities of large companies would need to be curbed. This can and should be done through legal means. Politics and war are not one and the same thing. At least they don't have to be. Clearly, politicians and political processes can start wars, and wars can be prolonged for political purposes. But politics itself, organizing and governing communities, does not have to involve armed conflict. Clearly, human beings haven't reached a stage in development where we are ready to give up the gun. Will we ever be ready? Through legal means, through education, by raising the standard of living for people everywhere, we can avoid repeating the horrors of the past. Many people are fond of saying that multiculturalism doesn't work, or multiculturalism has failed. The obvious problem with this view is that it ignores reality. Multiple cultures exist in towns and cities and villages all over the world. People from different cultural and ethnic backgrounds can and do live side by side in peace and goodwill. Peace is not a wall. Peace is not an electric fence. Peace is not segregation. Throwing up a barrier might provide a very temporary solution to a security problem, but in the long run, barriers are apt to generate bitterness and resentment. Neither of these are conducive to peace. It is the unification of peoples under consensual and democratic conditions which will lead to a peaceful future world order. We completely oppose segregation on the basis of so-called race. This is a historical injustice which must never be repeated. We are a species of many cultures, many ethnic groups, many backgrounds, but ultimately we are one human race. The world is made up of many borders, borders which are disputed in many cases, borders which are sometimes redrawn. A border in itself cannot bring about peace. Peace requires understanding and mutual respect, and it may well require reconciliation. It can't be reasonably denied that we are territorial animals. This has much to do with our evolution. People and groups do demand their own space. As long as this isn't a hindrance to peace or justice, this should be generally respected. The Edification Party understands the important role to be played by people of faith in bringing about world peace and world unification. One should not underestimate the power of religion. No true account of history is complete without acknowledging the central role that faith has played. The party is open to believers and non-believers alike. We must work together as brothers and sisters for a brighter tomorrow. Although we do, of course, have our disagreements, we would all do well to remember that we share one little planet, and if we are to survive, we need to learn how to coexist and respect each other's rights and freedoms. There does not need to be hostility between the religions of the world, or the religious individual, and a secular model world republic. There are, of course, many secular regimes in the world where religious people live in peace, and their right to worship is respected. This is right and proper. We believe in a humanistic worldview that can reach both believer and non-believer. The human family can be made stronger by the truth. The truth is, we can have a far better world than the one which presently exists. Peace, justice, order, and freedom are not simply words on a page. They are not simply political goals. They are desirable to people everywhere. They are moral targets. We can and should benefit from each other's labours, intelligence, and compassion. Our focus must be on improving human relations at all levels. The Edification Party is open to people worldwide, believer and non-believer. Peoples of all nations and all ethnic backgrounds are welcome. We support the right of peoples to self-determination as expressed through democratic processes. Everyone has a voice which should be heard. The rights of smaller groups and smaller nations should be respected. The protection of minority rights is something a world state must take measures to ensure. Is justice inherent in nature, or is it just another human value? Let us ask another question. Do we err when we try to separate humans from the rest of nature? Basically speaking, we are animals. Our beliefs and values arise from natural processes. Our inventions and practices arise from natural processes also. One might well ask the question, does anything exist outside of nature? This would of course depend on how you would define nature and how this fits into your own worldview. What does all this have to do with justice, you might well ask? Justice is a concept. It is the idea that you should get what you deserve. You should surely get a fair wage for a hard day's work. If someone steals from you, you should have the right to redress the grievance. If you commit a criminal offence, surely you should be held to account and punished accordingly. One might say that justice is a concept as relates to the world of shoulds. Is it an inaccuracy or an oversimplification to regard justice as a single concept? There are, of course, many different points of view and many differing conceptions of justice. Many believe that revenge is a form of justice, hard justice. We do not share this view. The vengeful or vindictive act is a stranger to justice, which must be cold and dispassionate. Justice is the impartial search for the truth. Justice means that everyone is entitled to a fair trial before a jury of his or her peers, a place where the accused can offer a defense and face his or her accusers. Justice is the rule of law for everyone, everywhere, all of the time. Learning how to forgive is an essential life skill. No one who harbours bitterness and resentment can ever be truly happy. People hold grudges for prolonged amounts of time because it offers the illusion of power and a feeling of security. But if you choose to hold on to your anger indefinitely, then you are a hostage. You cannot be free until you make the decision to let it go. If you don't forgive, you damage yourself. You can't have peace of mind if you keep resentment as a companion. Forgiveness can be seriously difficult. Pride can act as an obstacle. Sometimes our own conception of justice can get in the way. One can remain angry. One can remain full of rage. One can choose to remain a powerless victim. Or one can forgive and have freedom. We believe forgiveness is essential to happiness. It is a sign of personal progress when you are able to let negative past experiences go and move on. Forgiveness can actually improve a person's health. It is essential for individuals and communities to abandon old hatreds. Without forgiveness, cycles of deadly violence will never be broken. Old wounds need to heal. We need empathy and compassion to forgive. It also takes courage to love and trust again when you have been hurt or humiliated. People need to find the courage to do this for themselves foremost. With forgiveness comes hope, which is surely a thing we cannot do without. You, reading this, could play your part in a historical movement for enormous change on this planet. People alive today have the ability to affect the quality of life tomorrow. The living can affect the lives of those yet to be born. It does matter what you think. Your participation matters. Be on the right side of history. Join the Edification Party. Join the struggle to bring about a new world of unity, peace, freedom, order, and justice.